Welcome to Asia in Review at ThinkTech Hawaii, coming to you from Pioneer Plaza at downtown Honolulu. I'm your host, Hong Jiang, Associate Professor of Geography at University of Hawaii at Manoa. And my guest today is Mr. Manny Menendez III, a leader in international business in Hawaii. And we'll be talking about U.S.-China relations and business opportunities. Manny is the founder of MCM Group, which is an organization for international business and trade. And he's also chairman of a China National Coal EEG mining machinery company, a Sino-US equity joint venture for clean coal processing technologies. And he's a founder and CEO of several other companies. He's been working in China, Japan, and the Asia-Pacific region in the past 3 years. And Manny, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, my pleasure. 3 decades, by the way.
3 decades, that's right, with us. Thank you, especially because you just flew in back from China.
Yes, this morning.
This morning, yes. And you're probably dealing with jet lag now.
No jet lag.
Okay,
I'm glad they keep on the move.
That's great, and you probably get anywhere and you just land and get going immediately, given your business.
That actually prevents jet lag. You just got to keep moving around.
Tell us about your work right now in China.
Right now, we just finished a equity joint venture with one of China's top 50 companies called China National Coal Group. They're a state-owned enterprise. They're publicly traded. I think their asset base is $35 to $40 billion. And we set up a clean coal processing technology because China uses a lot of coal.
That's right, yeah.
And just from a statistic base, China's energy mix is 71% of all the energy in China comes from coal, about 20% from oil, and the 9% that's remaining come from solar, geothermal, wind, etc. So coal is the largest source of energy in China. And right now, there's huge problems with pollution.
We hear so much about it.
Yeah, well, if I start coughing a little, it's because I'm not used to the clean air of Honolulu.
That's right.
But in any case, the clean coal technology, coal is essentially dirty when you're handling it, but if you wash it, crush it to a certain size, and then you dry it, and then you actually burn it, you lower carbon emissions and remove a lot of the foreign material on the surface of the coal, which causes for an unclean burn. So the equipment we're importing the technology to China to manufacture equipment, essentially crushing equipment, centrifuges, and screens that size the coal. And we built a factory, completed now, in Erdos, which is in Inner Mongolia.
That's right, where you have a huge coal mining company there.
Well, Erdos is the epicenter of China coal. Most of the coal coming out of China is coming from Erdos, and then the second area, which is the largest, is Shanxi province. So just as it's, again, statistics, China will use about 3.8 billion tons of coal this year. In 2013, and about the same in 2014, maybe a little bit more. And in comparison to the United States, that uses about 1 billion tons of coal a year.
Wow, that's
so almost 4 times more.
These machineries that's producing kind of clean coal processing, are they being used already?
Yeah, in the United States, about 50% of all the coal is what we call washed coal. They're using this technology. In China, about 44% of the coal is washed, but again, it's a higher number. So this technology has been around a long time, and now that China has made a commitment to trying to clean the air and clean the environment, this is one of the proven technologies that the United States has used for quite a long time, that we've now set up the manufacturing facilities.
Are you the only one, or one of many?
Oh, many. There are companies in Germany that are quite famous in this area, companies in Australia, and around the world that have the technology. But the group that we put together in the United States is a market leader. They have about 80% of the U.S. market share. So they're number one in the U.S. And we packaged them into a nice group and then brought them over to China to do this equity joint venture with China National Coal.
Well, that's definitely a great thing given what we hear so much about the environmental problems and also just China growing and continue to need more energy, and this technology would definitely be a great help. I understand you have engaged in quite a few other things in China. Are those other ventures also going on simultaneously?
Well, I've been focused on this. This is a very significant project with one of the, as I said before, largest companies in China. And so you have to stay focused and you
That's
have to
right,
be there. And it's not just putting the strategy together, doing the negotiations, which we did, but it's actually getting into the granular level where you get into things like the bill of materials, where the supply is coming from, can you get local content versus imported content, and figuring out marketing strategies and so forth. So they both sides, both the Chinese side and the U.S. side, felt confident in moving forward, so they appointed me as the chairman of the board, which
great.
I've been trying.
Congratulations.
I've been trying to remove myself as quickly as possible from that position. I'll stay on the board. I'm one of the investors in the U.S. company, so I've invested in the company, and we want to make sure it goes well. But other projects, worked in biotech, pharma area, publishing, consumer products, giftware, garments, making bicycles in China. I was one of the early people bringing in technology to make single speed, to make multi-speed mountain bikes, children's bikes, BMX bikes, 10-speed bikes in China a long time ago. That's in the 1980s.
You're definitely an entrepreneur.
Well, looking at where the opportunity is, I mean, you know, in China, there's an expression of yin and yang, and wherever you see trouble, there's also opportunity. So when you look at issues of pollution or issues that are significant, if you can bring solutions, not just criticisms. Everyone tends to criticize, but you know, the United States, we were no angels when we industrialized. We polluted a lot of things as well. So instead of talking in the negative, I mean, look at the opportunity. And this is an example of where there's a need for a technology, putting a package together, you know, and moving forward on a positive basis.
Yeah, that's definitely just so crucial. You know, my work is on the environmental side.
Yes.
And as soon as I see you working on the clean coal processing technologies, oh my God, that's definitely huge.
Yeah, well,
and there's a huge demand there.
But I mean, it takes years. I mean, in the end, people will remember who are listening to the show, in the 1960s and 70s, Los Angeles had huge pollution issues, air pollution issues, and they took it seriously, put some laws. You had to have a special car in California with catalytic converters. And they really, over a 25-year period, it took that long to actually clean up a lot of the environment in the Los Angeles area. China will have to do the same thing because the people now are making more money and they want to live healthier and have the opportunity to spend the money that they're making, because a lot of people are doing very well in China these days.
I want to give our viewers this particular piece of information. You're one of the earliest business pioneers in China in the late 1970s. In the 1980s, you're president of Green Eastern Development Limited. You were credited with successfully completing the first joint venture between U.S. and China, and that is amazing. And this joint venture was for a major Fortune 100 company.
Yes, it was actually China just opened up in 1978, which was my first trip, and then in '79 they created what's called the Foreign Investment Act that allowed to do so you could actually do business with the structure that they put in place. And then in 1980, we signed the first joint venture between the U.S. and China, because it was stated in the Wall Street Journal, and everything you read in the paper, you know, is always true. But in any case, we signed the joint venture with a company in Chicago called Beatrice Foods. So Beatrice Foods was the U.S. partner, and the Chinese partners was 25% was owned by CITIC, I worked directly with Rong Yuren, who was a very famous capitalist, family from Shanghai. And the other 25% was the local government of Canton, which is now Guangzhou. And that was a food processing plant. And everyone thought it was about the brands of Beatrice, but actually in the early days it was more about the food technologies and bottling technologies that we brought to China.
Why China? When did you first get to China? How did you get interested in doing business in China?
Well, I actually, in my first career, worked in Europe. And the products that I worked in Austria and Vienna, and set up a U.S. operation for a very old line Austrian company that made recreational products, bicycles, mopeds, sporting firearms, and a number of other products, vehicles, specialized vehicles. And the price of the products from Europe was too expensive to have only European products to enter this market. So started traveling to Japan. When I traveled to Japan, the yen was 360 yen to the dollar. Now it's about under 100, so 3.6 times larger. And I thought that was very inexpensive, what I was getting out of Japan. Then I went to Taiwan and Hong Kong, and then
China.
Well, it was almost free. China wasn't open yet, but the pricing was so incredible when you compared it. And then it just got me excited that once that area of the world would get know-how and new technologies and best practices, they're going to be a force to be reckoned with. So I got really excited about it. Plus, I just love Chinese philosophy. It's 5,000 years of history.
Well, we should talk more about it.
Yeah, no, I think it's wonderful. Love the philosophy and love the country. Really think that a strong China and a strong U.S. together will kind of keep the world going in the right direction.
Yeah, definitely. And since 1970s, China has changed a great deal in terms of the size of the economy, also the size of the problem. And you've seen all of this.
Well, I've seen, I tell people what's happened in China is not good. It's not great. It's absolutely a miracle because of the scale. You know, 200 million people in China have come out of absolute poverty because of the open door policy set by Deng Xiaoping of one country, two systems. And this opening of China has really changed the landscape of the world. China, give you a quick data point, in 2003, China was the 7th largest economy in the world, equal to Italy, about $1.4 trillion in GDP. And then from then to 2009, they went from 7 to number 2. So in 2009, they surpassed Germany and Japan, and now the number 2 economy in the world, just behind the U.S.
Of course, at the same time, China also became the largest emitter of carbon dioxide.
Yes, well, if you want to put it in the right Chinese perspective, they're the largest carbon producer of carbon emissions, but on a per capita basis,
It's
they're
still very
smaller.
low. Exactly. Yeah.
So when they look at the U.S., U.S. is the 2nd largest carbon emitter in the world, but on a per capita basis, we're the largest.
It's interesting when you look at China, the often depends on which side are you looking at. Are you looking at the positive and the negative? And oftentimes you need to look at kind of both sides.
You always have to look. I think it's a good to know that whatever China is going through now, we already went through. And I think that knowledge that we have of how we guided ourselves through some of these issues, especially pollution, environmental issues, I think is very, very important. The big difference, though, is in the United States, environmental law was created through lawsuits. Back in the 1960s, there were major cases in the east coast of the United States on the Hudson River that created actually a lawsuit that showed that certain types of projects affected people's lives. And that was right after that, then, you know, we had the Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, and then the environmental movement started. I didn't, you don't know this about my background, but when I was 17 years old, in a small town I grew up in of 8,000 people, I had a huge protest, a good high school protest, a peaceful protest, I might add, of protecting our trees because they were going to cut them down.
Oh, great! You're an environmentalist.
Well, back then we called it ecologist, and the reward for actually beating my local government and stopping the project was they made me the environmental commissioner of the community at the age of 17. So I was one of the early environmental commissioners.
Oh wow! Amazing
17 through 22. And if you look at the kind of projects I've touched, when I talked about Austria, bicycles and mopeds, are kind of environmentally friendly.
Exactly, yeah.
I built was in charge of a project for Dow Jones and the Washington Post, and a investor group in Connecticut, and I was part of the general partnership of building an environmentally friendly paper mill.
And now, and clean coal.
Well, the paper mill didn't pollute, and it didn't use chemicals, so it used a new technology called thermomechanical pulping.
Wow.
And then you go kind of to today, and then there's another project that actually has an positive environmental impact. So there's actually a thread through a lot of the projects I've done that have a environmental theme to them.
We definitely need more business with the environmental awareness and good environmental outcome, like you've done.
Well, I think the key is, there's a saying that, we have to leave the earth in a better condition, for our future generations. And that's just not hollow words, that we really have to do that.
Exactly. So good point to take a quick break. This is Asia in Review at ThinkTech Hawaii, and we've been talking with Manny Menendez about U.S.-China relations and business opportunities. We will be right back after this short break.
We want to thank our underwriters. Hawaiian Electric Company and its affiliates Maui Electric on Maui and Hawaii Electric Light Company on Hawaii Island are deeply committed to the communities they serve. Galen Ho is a senior executive of BAE Systems, a global defense, security, and aerospace company. The High-Tech Development Corporation, the state's leading technology agency, attached to the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism. Castle and Cook Hawaii, with a time-honored legacy that spans more than 160 years and revolves around its mission of investing in Hawaii, creating communities, and providing for the needs of our state. Hawaii Gas, formerly the Gas Company, a proponent of the Liquefied Natural Gas Initiative, helping Hawaii achieve its transition to clean energy and a better energy future. Collateral Analytics, a Hawaii-based tech company empowering the real estate industry with greater and faster access to the tools and data they need to make better informed property investment decisions. I'm Nicole Horry. Thanks so much for joining us on ThinkTech. I'm Maria Kashem. See you next time.
Hi, we're back. We're live, coming to you from Pioneer Plaza at ThinkTech Hawaii. I'm your host, Hong Jiang, and this is Asia in Review. And we've been speaking about U.S.-China relations and business opportunities. So Manny, from 1970s till now, I'm sure there's just so much change you've seen. And can you talk about some of the major changes you've seen? What's the number one change in terms of business?
Well, I think. Let me make a kind of a high level view. So, in the early days, it was really hard to get projects completed, like the first joint venture. Very difficult. Not because anybody wanted to drag their feet. It's just that there were all new laws.
The system wasn't just putting things in place.
Well, the system was not exercised. It was pre-exercising the system. People did not know all the kind of in and outs of deal making and so forth. So I usually say that in the early days, a little takes longer, more difficult to make deals, but if you made the deal and you finished and had the patience to get through the whole process, because the government approvals in the early days were joint ventures, for example, went to what was called the State Economic Commission and the State Planning Commission, which is all gone now, and you needed a very, very high level. State planning and state economic is national agencies to decide on projects, even if they were small. So difficult to do, but if you finished, very good chance to make money. Now, very easy, or much easier, I should say, to do deals, get deals done, but more difficult to make money because the velocity of projects are so high now, and people are very familiar in China with the rules and regulations.
That's right.
I think some of the big changes are also rule of law. China is moving towards a rule of law. Early days, not so many rules. Now, too many rules in many areas. I have a WOFE in China, which is a wholly foreign-owned enterprise. China makes you pay your tax every month, not like the United States once a year. So you got to pay your tax, you have to do all your filings every single month. It's very, very, no pun intended, a lot of red tape. So a lot of changes in the landscape in China. Obviously, industrialization has been incredible. Started on the eastern part of China and then has now moved west. So there's been this miracle emergence of a middle class. Middle class does exist in China, and I think that that's been the big change. Also, in the early times of China, the per capita income, was less than $1 a day, and now people are making the average, depending on whose statistics you read, is $6,000 per capita, which used to be $1 a day, so less than a couple $100 a year per capita. So from $200 a year to over 6,000, over a population of 1.4 billion. In the cities, the incomes are very, very significant now.
Yeah, definitely. At the same time, I've heard, from people going to China to do business, as you said, there's so many more. It's not as easy to make money anymore, and there are also challenges you still face in terms of doing business in China. What are some of those?
I think that the challenge is sometimes we read what we're doing in China a little bit differently than the Chinese read it. In other words, our pace of business in the U.S. is kind of get there quickly because time is money. But at the same time, in China, I have an expression where you go slow to finish first. Because it's really more important in the beginning of who your partner is. Sometimes Westerners move too quickly with the wrong partner, and then they get tied up in arrangements that are not correct for the long term. So spending the time, it's imperative that spending the time with potential partners to make sure you have the right one, and that your goals and objectives are aligned, so you're not having conflict in the future. And the best way to know a good partner in China is not when everything is going well, but when everything is difficult. Then you can see how people handle and conduct themselves. So I think it's important to really kind of get your strategy in place. China is also not the place in today's China, is not you have to go in and know what you're doing. So in the beginning, you always hear the expression of guanxi, having relationships. Relations are important all over the world. Relationships are especially important in Asia and China, but relationships is not enough now. You have to know what you're doing. You have to know what you're doing in order to succeed in China. And it's not one of these places where you go and not know kind of the game plan and not know your strategy and not know the rules and regulations, because they're a little different than the U.S.
I guess the business is more saturated now than before, and more things are set up.
But when you look at China, when people talk about doing business in China, sometimes their eyes gloss over because it's such a big place, 1.4 billion people. But actually, if you look at what I advocate to clients that I have private equity clients, for example, is to focus on a city strategy. So this is one of my intellectual property IP that I tell my clients is focus on a city. So if you pick, for example, you want to enter China and you have a product or service, you try to match it up to an area. So it might fit in, for example, a Shanghai, but that same product or service may not fit in Harbin, where you're from in Heilongjiang province. It may not match up. So once you do that, let's say it's Shanghai. Shanghai's population or Beijing's population on a city-focused strategy is equal to like 20 million people, which is equal to the entire population of Australia.
That's right. Yeah.
So one city.
It's a great many customers just right there.
Just right there. So you don't have to think about attacking all of China because very few people can do it. But you can look at your product and service and match it up to the area that has the best chance for success.
And that's where the local knowledge, like you have over the years, are very, very helpful.
Well, I'm constantly learning. I mean, I've been in China, I guess 34 years now, going back and forth and staying there, living there. But the point is it's changed a lot. And I think you have to look at it from a perspective as you cannot really know everything.
That's right.
And one of the examples I tend to use is that that when the president of China wakes up in the morning, the country that he knew yesterday already changed in the morning. I mean, China has such velocity today
That's right.
that it's changing very quickly. So I'm a student of China. I know what I know from a business perspective by doing. It's
That's
not
right,
from a
yeah.
book.
Yeah.
It's not from someone telling me what to do. It's actually trying to do projects and actually completing them successfully, and you learn a lot by doing. And you learn a lot by making mistakes. In the early days, I should have done this way
Yeah,
and that
yeah,
way.
definitely,
And
yeah.
you kind of get your own knowledge base, but if you do it long enough, you can get pretty good at it.
What about language? Do you speak Chinese?
I speak really good Chinese when I'm drinking.
Oh,
More I drink,
That's very helpful.
The more Baijiu and Mao Tai I drink, the better my Chinese. My Chinese, yi dian dian, a little bit. And I think that speaking Chinese is very helpful, but it's not the most important thing. Thinking Chinese is more important than speaking
that's
Chinese.
a very, very astute observation. Thinking Chinese.
It's my only rationalization of why I don't speak so well, because I have a lot of friends, even here in Hawaii, that have beautiful Chinese. But I think where I focused is more on the thinking patterns, business thinking patterns, and how to kind of move things through to completion. So on that end, I do pretty well.
That's wonderful. And given the thinking Chinese, understanding Chinese, it seems to me there are kind of different challenges. There are cultural differences, customs
Sure.
difference, and there are also the difference in terms of the whole kind of political system. And
is.
although you said rule of law is being built up, but there's still a lot of gaps there, and there are also a lot of corruption going on there.
There's corruption not only in China, but all over the world.
And that's where I heard these almost like horror stories about people going into China thinking they're going to do business just what they understand business is dealt with here, but then they don't know the behind the scenes, what's happening, and when the Chinese partner are saying something, they're asked for certain kind of a commission back. Anyway,
first of all, kind of the rules. It's against the law to do that. So we have in the United States called the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, FCPA, and you have to follow that. If you don't follow that, you can go to jail. And it's not, for any business, it's not worth to take a shortcut. So you do things right. And I can tell you for sure, if you have a partner that you're talking to that's asking for something,
Yeah.
you already know you have a wrong partner.
that's right.
Okay,
Exactly.
so you should know that right away.
So how quickly can you know it? That takes experience.
Well, no,
like
not
you
only
have.
experience. Sometimes it's oblique. What people ask you for, but you just don't break the law. Just put that in your mind.
That's
that
right,
that
yeah.
if you're dealing in that channel, you're dealing in the wrong channel. I mean, Xi Jinping has made it his priority as the new president of China to really attack corruption, and he's been doing that. There are more cases on throwing people in jail. They had the high-profile case
I know,
with
they,
Bo Xilai, who was convicted. But there's at every level there's been problems, and they're trying to fix it. But it's not just indicative of China. It's indicative of a lot of places in the world. There are
That's right,
places that I've done business in that are much, much worse than China.
I see.
I mean, I remember in New York when I used to go to some of the trade shows, and if you didn't take care of the guys that unloaded your truck, they wouldn't unload your truck. Your truck get unloaded last.
That's right.
And
Yeah,
I don't want to
definitely.
point. I'm not saying that China or the U.S. Are the same. They're not. But at the same time, corruption is a worldwide problem, and I just don't want to finger China.
That's
but
true.
they're trying to do something about it. But remember, the scale is much, much different.
That's
and
right,
the country's very, very spread out, and it's hard sometimes for leadership to actually get to every part of the country to make sure that people are following the policies.
One thing I'm curious because doing business in China, a lot of the businesses like this coal processing company that you're working with the Chinese government-run
Yes.
company.
State-owned
Okay.
enterprise.
Relationship with the government or with the government leaders. I'm sure that's very crucial, right?
It's a great point. I think in the U.S. that's maybe a big distinction between the two countries. In the U.S. it's helpful to know government people, but not essential. In China it's the reverse. It's essential to know government people at every level. And that's why I get to know them, is because you need them for business. When I say you need them for business, is the government of China is so involved in many industry sectors, not all sectors, but the one on clean coal they are definitely involved in because it's a strategic sector. Energy is one of those areas like you have Sinopec, CNOC, you know, big companies like Shanghai Energy Corporation that are state-owned enterprises focused on energy because it's a strategic resource. So, but at the same time, if you can actually do projects, this particular project on clean coal, the American side is the majority owner, which is very unusual with a state-owned enterprise. Usually, state-owned enterprises control the deal. But on this side, the U.S. side, through pretty strong negotiations, which I did on behalf of the client, you know, we control it.
How long did it take for you to get through the whole negotiation?
Well, it took from start to finish, from making the negotiations, signing the contract, and actually building the two factories in Erdos, which are about 700,000, 800,000 square feet. So they're not small. That took about 11 months. Now, 11 months to actually negotiate, sign, get all the approvals, because we needed 16 approvals from the government to do the joint venture. The big high-level approvals was the SASAC, which is a state supervisory asset control. They work with state-owned enterprises, kind of control them or manage them. Then the next level was NDRC, National Development Reform Commission. And then after that approval, you have MOFCOM, Ministry of Commerce. And then after that, you have SAIC, State Administration for Industry and Commerce. And then many sub-approvals, like environmental approvals for environmental impact statements, energy approvals, lots of local approvals. So to do that and build a factory
That's actually very
in
quick.
11 months, yeah, that's pretty good.
Okay.
Because these are greenfield factories that are built
that's
from
right.
ground up.
Wow, wonderful. Let's take another break. This is Asia in Review at Think Tech Hawaii, and we'll be talking about U.S.-China relations and business opportunities. We'll be right back after this short break.
Aloha, I'm Nicole Hori for Think Tech. For nearly half a century, the Hawaii Foreign Trade Zone No. 9 has brought the benefits of the Foreign Trade Zone program to Hawaii businesses and entrepreneurs. DBET, the Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism, operates Hawaii's Foreign Trade Zone program to encourage international business and economic development. The Foreign Trade Zone's mission is to increase the amount of international trading activity in Hawaii, thereby providing employment opportunities for the residents of our island state. For more information, see ftz9.org. I'm Nicole Hori. Mahalo.
We're back. We're live, coming to you from Pioneer Plaza at downtown Honolulu. This is Asia in Review at Think Tech Hawaii, and we'll be speaking with Manny Menendez about business opportunities in China and U.S.-China relations. So, Manny, you said you are living 80% of the time in China right now.
Yes.
How is the daily living?
Well,
First, where do you have your home there in China?
Apartment is in Beijing.
Okay.
But most of the time I'm in Erdos at the factory, making sure things are starting up properly and manufacturing is taking place. And we actually just got our first order, about $5 million US order for the factory, so it's good. We're off to a auspicious beginning.
Definitely.
But usually the first thing I do in the morning after you kind of get ready to go to work is I check the PM count. This is 2.5 PM. Particulate matter or parts per million, but it's really looks at how bad the air is. And you know, in the U.S., typically the scale is 0 to 50. Most cities are 0 to 50. If it's kind of a higher pollution city, a lot of manufacturing could be 50 to 100. And so typically in China, if during the last Chinese New Year, it got up to 800.
Oh my God.
Now, in the United States, if we get to 300 on the 2.5, we'd call it an emergency.
It's an alarm.
No, it'd be an emergency. So when I'm wheezing like this,
I can see you coughing.
It's not because of a cold. It's just because I've got the shock of clean air getting off the airplane in Honolulu.
Wow.
So it's terrible. I wear a mask. A lot of the tourism numbers are actually down in China because of this. But the people are demanding that the government do something. So they're taking action. And that's why this clean coal technology deal, which I've talked, maybe the idea with Jay maybe a couple years ago. So it went from a couple years idea to actually a reality now. So this 2.5 p.m. index, you can go online. The viewers or listeners can check that. I usually look at the U.S. Embassy in Beijing, and they have a meter on the top of the embassy, and so that's very reliable data.
What about food safety? Is that an issue you have to deal with?
Absolutely. Not only do foreigners worry about food safety, the Chinese worry about food safety.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, they've had incidences with melamine, as you know, with with the milk that caused a lot of trouble. 400,000 kids were affected. They have a number of issues with food safety, but those issues are areas of opportunity. So when you look at an issue in China, don't say, "Oh, that's bad." Just say, "How can I help? How can I solve that issue?" And that's the kind of spirit you need to be successful, I think, in business anywhere in the world, but certainly in China. There's too many people that still today criticize China, but actually what they have done has helped the world. I mean, they have really helped the economies of the surrounding areas through the Asia financial crisis. They stayed strong. They kept their currency stable. They could have changed their currency like other countries, but they didn't. And they are cooperating more and more with the rest of the world. So I think that it's a miracle to see what China has been able to do to go from nowhere to the second largest economy in the world.
I think a lot of the criticisms that I hear are about the whole kind of system, corruption in the system, and also the human rights issues. And those issues are definitely there. And partly probably related to the fast growth focus of the government, that some of these human kind of interests are not taken care of.
Human rights is an issue in many parts of the world, you know, and I think China recognizes it and is trying to improve it, but I, from my own perspective, have seen where China started in the late 70s and where they are now, and human rights has been fantastic, gotten a lot better. Not all over China, but it is much better than it was ever in the 1970s and 80s and 90s. China's leadership is constantly trying to improve. And you have to watch what the leaders do in order to understand how they want to move a nation. But there's 23 or 22% of the world's population is in one place. So when you move, it's like we're in a speedboat in Hawaii, and China is like the QE2. I mean, Queen Mary, or Queen Elizabeth, you know, QE2. So it takes them a little bit time to turn, but once they do, I think the other thing to look at China is that their commitment, when they make a commitment to do something, they usually do it. So these 5-year plans that come out every 5 years, I think they're on their 12th 5-year plan. Whatever in that plan, they actually try to do it and accomplish it. So they're getting there. It's going to take time. They were closed, as you know, for quite some time, but they've entered the world stage, and they know they have now a greater responsibility because they're a global player now, and they're trying to find their way. It's going to take time, but I'm very.
So look like you're very optimistic.
I'm very confident.
Okay.
I mean, they've talked about China's economy crashing several times, and they figured out ways to navigate it, and I think they did a great job at doing that.
So I know there are differences of opinion in terms of whether you trust the Chinese government, especially the Communist Party, is able to change itself. Or does the party have to go, and what about the political reform there? So there are a lot of talks about that. I'm sure that you heard about it. We don't have time to get into that, but maybe the next part of the show, after we take this break, we'll talk about U.S.-China relations.
Sure,
part of that would those questions might get in. So we're going to take the last short break. We've been talking about U.S.-China relations and the business opportunities, and we'll be right back.
Aloha, I'm Maria Kashem of Think Tech Hawaii, and I want to tell you about our Think Tech talk shows. If you didn't know it, Think Tech streams video and audio for all of its shows live on the internet from 2 to 5 p.m. every weekday afternoon, and we replay them all night long on Ustream.tv. Visit thinktechhawaii.com for our live stream and YouTube links. Raise your awareness on Think Tech. I'm Maria Kashem, and I'll see you there.
Aloha, I'm Jay Fidel of Think Tech. We have some news for you. In addition to our Think Tech TV show and our Asia in Review show on Olelo 54, as of January 1st, we're adding Community Matters to play also 2 hours a week. Check out thinktechhawaii.com for the specific times of each of these shows. We hope you enjoy all three. Mahalo, I'm Jay Fidel.
We're back, we're live, coming to you from Pioneer Plaza at downtown Honolulu. This is Asia in Review at Think Tech Hawaii, and we'll be speaking with Manny Menendez about U.S.-China relations and business opportunities. So talking about business opportunities, the one other area that we wanted to cover is U.S.-China relations, and you are the witness of all the changes over the years. How do you assess the kind of the current situation with U.S.-China relations vis-a-vis business opportunities?
Well, first, I think you have to put a couple things in perspective. All countries compete with the United States for business. And now that China's the second largest economy in the world, they're competing fiercely for business. So that should be expected, and that's kind of a separate category. There's going to be a lot of issues, free trade issues, dumping issues, just like
intellectual property,
IP. You know, that's kind of in the business bucket. In a larger perspective, it's my strong belief that you have world peace through world trade.
Okay.
The more people do business together, they don't kill each other. They cooperate.
Okay.
So business is actually one of those great tools, like sports, like the Olympics, where you can compete, but it brings people together. So on the political front, I'm not the expert. Actually, this event that I'm going to do with Pacific Forum on February 5th, Ralph Casa and his group, CSIS, they really watch kind of the geopolitical scene much more carefully than I am. I'm just a small business guy that
not a small one.
Yeah, just a small potato, but I work on business issues. But I think there's a perspective that I wanted to share with you and the audience. Is in the United States we have a multi-party system. You know, the two largest parties, Democrat and Republicans, and sometimes you get into where the country's going to go, the government's going to go bankrupt, and people are fighting and pointing fingers and so forth. In China, they don't have that luxury.
That's right.
They have one party. So that one party...
Well, people don't dare to do a lot of those.
But I want to put it in the perspective of that one party has to perform or not exist. So they have a weight of making sure that they perform. And they can't say it's the Republicans or the Democrats, it's them. But within the Communist Party in China, which has 80 million members, it's about 80 million members in the Communist Party, that party is structured in such a way where there are sub-parties. There's minority groups, women groups, minority culture groups. So there is a robust debate in the National People's Congress now. And one of the striking differences, say, between the opening period and now, is people are really engaging in conversation on how to improve their country. Just like they just changed the one-child policy, where you can have more. That was a big debate in the National People's Congress, and now children that come from one child in that family can have 2 kids.
I want to give you just a little bit of a challenge on two points.
Yes.
One is that you believe that trade will bring peace.
Yes.
And there has been a lot of kind of skepticisms about it, because China has been kind of in this transition since 1970s, that you have this economic growth and entering into the market economy, but at the same time, politically, it remains one-party control, and a lot of the grim issues, especially related to the extreme area of human rights, are really not seeing a lot of change. So some people actually are skeptical of whether this open trade can bring about political change.
Well, I think that it has brought political change, maybe not to the speed or magnitude that other countries would like, but I think it's much better today than it was definitely during the opening. There's no question, there's debate. The newspapers pick up on issues. I mean, in the past, all the news was good. And now that you actually see issues in the paper of pollution, food safety, traffic. If there's a murder, I mean, it's mentioned in the paper. It's not like it was before. It's not the same kind of open policy we have with information in the U.S., but it's getting there. I have confidence that it will get there, and I think that you will see a democratic. There's a democratic movement. In fact, Premier Wen Jianbao talked about that before he left office.
That's an interesting point. That's the second question I want to bring up. That you see the diversity within the party.
Yes.
And I think it's diversity among the people, and even some party members, top party officials,
Yes.
are advocating for democracy or more open society. At the same time, I'm sure you're aware that even Wen Jiabao, who advocated for political change, his speeches were censored and taken off from the Chinese website, which is amazing.
Yeah. Well, I say I don't know those kind of things. I mean, I've read a speech. I've had the opportunity to meet him, and I think that. But they're talking about democracy, but with Chinese characteristics. So, in other words, our model, is a little different than the model that will emerge. It has to kind of fit the Chinese style and Chinese history and Chinese culture. But I wanted to mention that, for example, there's a lot of countries that don't elect their leaders. I mean, through open elections. The ruling party of Australia chooses who's the boss. The ruling party, if you will, in Japan chooses the boss. England chooses the ruling party chooses the leaders in a lot of countries where it's not an open election. And China does the same thing, except your point is there's only one party.
Yeah.
But I think you'll see some changes in the next decade that will be profound changes in the political structure. And I think Xi Jinping has the strength and the ability maybe to carry forward some reforms that his predecessors, if you go back all the way back, kind of Deng Xiaoping was this kind of a thesis of mine. There's two kinds of leaders. There's transformational leaders and transitional leaders. Many countries see transitional leaders, they kind of move things up, move their country forward, but then there's these brilliant transformational leaders like a Deng Xiaoping. On economic issues, I think President Jiang Zemin was quite transformational on economic policy. And then other leaders kind of just keep things stable and moving along. And I think Xi Jinping has the opportunity to be transformational on a number of issues.
And we'll wait and see.
We'll see. Well, he'll be in for, if it all goes as planned, he should be in there for 10 years.
We'll see. That's right.
2 5-year terms.
We have 2 minutes left. What about opportunities for Hawaii in terms of business?
Well, Hawaii,
in connection with China.
Yeah, I think Jay knows this from previous discussions. The biggest opportunity for Hawaii, or the largest import for Hawaii to China or the developing nations, is its knowledge. I'm kind of in a small way a producer of knowledge and take that knowledge in order to do projects. So, architects and lawyers and people that can provide knowledge and solutions to issues, have a big opportunity. That's our largest opportunity. Educational exchange.
Yeah.
Over 300,000 students from China study in the United States each year. It goes up 20% a year every year. Big opportunities in education. Big opportunities in sports exchanges. There's going to be a wave of investment, ODI, outbound direct investment, from China to the United States, and Hawaii is going to see some of that activity. So I think small businesses can do well in China if they have a product or services that can fit the Chinese market. Don't have to be Nike or Budweiser or
That's right.
Boeing. I mean, small guys can make it in China. I must emphasize, you must know what you're doing.
That's right.
You must really do your homework, and then I think you could do well in that market. There are a middle class in China that's very hungry for products, and China's big shift has gone from a world factory to a world market.
And hopefully that's good for everybody.
That, I think, is good. Commerce is good.
Well, thank you so much, Manny. I wanted our viewers to know that Manny will be speaking on February 5th at the Pacific Club on China 2014, where China is now, where China is headed, and implications for Hawaii. And if you are interested in attending this talk, you can call 521-6745.
That's a Pacific Forum number.
That's
yeah.
a Pacific Forum number, and the deadline is Friday, January 31st to put in your name, and the event is February 5th. What time?
Yeah, it starts
5
at
p.m.
No, it starts at 7:30.
Oh, 7:30.
7:30.
Evening
No,
talk.
7:30 in the morning.
Oh, in the morning.
Yeah,
Oh, it's
this
the
is
morning.
yeah, 7:30
Got it.
executive briefing, and it's going to be Q&A. So I promise there will be no death by PowerPoint.
Okay. That'll be a fascinating talk there. And thank you so much, Manny, for being here today.
Oh, my pleasure. And I should mention to the viewers, Xinyan Kuai-le. I mean, it's
新年快乐.
Yeah, Xinyan Kuai-le. It's the Chinese New Year, starts on Friday, the 31st.
That's
So,
right.
The
And
year
Happy
of the
New Year.
horse
That's right, yeah. And prosperity to you all, and thank you.
and good health.
I'll see you next Tuesday at Asia in Review. Thank you. Goodbye.